Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we are going to play with greener shade acid dyes again. And I thought it would be fun to try some speckling on the countertop followed by steaming and just see how they do. I think that this is a technique that I didn't do in my review of these types of dyes. Before we jump on into our projects, I would like to give a huge shout out and thank you to today's Dyepot Weekly lab partner, Deb. Deb, thank you so much for being my lab partner today, and I really hope you love the yarn that we're gonna create. The recap of my original review is that the dyes performed really well and I was very happy with them. But I do think that they are really, really expensive, so I don't recommend necessarily going out and purchasing them over Jacquard or Dharma, just because the color range is ultimately fairly limited, and as I said, they're a lot more expensive. And so even though, you know, they say it's a responsible way to dye, heavy metal free, there's, except for I think one color, I think there are benefits to that, but ultimately you still need to make sure you're using dedicated dye equipment, and you still need to make sure you're wearing personal safety equipment. So when I am going and doing the speckling and playing with these powders, I will be wearing a respirator mask, safety glasses, and gloves so I don't inhale any powders or risk getting them in my eyes. This is something that I recommend whenever you are dealing with any powders. And so just because it's marketed as being greener, or I don't know what they said about the organic. I don't know. Whatever they say, please make sure you're using safety equipment. But now let's go dye our yarn. I added some of my favorite reusable nylon zip ties to the yarn and pre-soaked 300 grams of Knit Picks Swish DK, a yarn that is 100% superwash merino. I pre-soaked this in just some plain tap water overnight, so it's nice and saturated, but I am going to need to add some acid to it because we're going to do a countertop technique, and, well, we want to make sure that the dyes will strike. All right, to our pre-soaking yarn, I'm going to go ahead and add, let's add 3 tablespoons of white vinegar. There's not a lot of water here in the pan, but I will be moving the liquid all the way through. Actually, yeah, there's really not a lot of water in here. But by doing this, the acid can access all the fiber. In addition to wearing safety equipment, everything I'm using today is dedicated for dyeing yarn and is not used for the preparation of food. And that goes for the steamer baskets, and if I use any spoons. I forget if my fingers fit in these jars. But anyway, I'm now going to squeeze out most of the liquid. I don't want it bone dry because I want the dyes to be able to dissolve on the fiber, but yeah, I'm gonna squeeze out a lot of the liquid and we will spread them out on my protected work surface, which is protected with a IKEA shower curtain. I picked 4 colors to play with today. I think we'll see how things go. I forget, I haven't re-looked at the swatches, so I forget how the different hues really look. But the 4 colors that I picked are Amethyst Purple, River Blue, Amazon Green, and Coral Reef Aqua. And I believe the Coral Reef Aqua is the one that has, I don't remember. Check out the Greener Shades website if you want information about any of the dyes. I have spread the yarn out on the counter so that way, just not straight, just we're randomly gonna apply these colors on. Not sure how light or heavy, we'll see how the colors layer and want to come together. I did soak a skein of Knit Picks Stroll fingering weight yarn. This yarn is 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, as a mop. And what I do with a mop like this is after I go from one color to another, I will wipe my gloves on here to capture that excess dye versus just washing my hands. So hopefully that makes sense. The yarn mop is off camera, but I will show you the yarn in the end. But let's start, I feel like the Coral Reef Aqua wasn't as bright as I thought it was. I think the purple breaks. Let's start with River Blue. So the jars are a good size. Oh, it is hard to get my fingers in there. But I'm doing, I mean, we're quote speckling, but I think I'm doing something that is a little more akin to what I did for the sparkle colorway in Hanukkah 2020, where I'm just sort of gonna layer it on, move it, and layer it on. So we're not necessarily going for like sharp speckles, but we might get some sharp speckles. Okay, so that was the river blue color. And then, even though I'm gonna do this mostly off camera, I'm now wiping as much of the dye off onto this mop, setting it aside, and then I will be making sure to dry my fingers. Sometimes I rinse and dry. Sometimes I just dry on a paper towel. You don't want to introduce moisture into your dye stalks. Okay, I'm now coming in with Coral Reef Aqua, which I believe was greener than, oh, that's the counter, but we'll pick it up. That's not going to be a problem. We can probably also, the yarn mop will be used to like clean up the countertop. Do want to pay attention to add color around the ties, and also remember as I'm doing this to not go too heavy, but I like a good heavy speckle. So yes, this color for something called Coral Reef Aqua, I think I wanted it to be a turquoise, but it's actually more, check out that like green. I would call it almost like a teal versus an aqua. And then I do move the yarn mop around. I am wearing my mask. I'm muffled. There's a chance at some point we will shift to like a voiceover and time lapse, but I promise whenever I am dealing with dry dye powders, I am wearing a mask. But keep in mind that you do want like a proper particle mask. You don't want to be using, say, like a cloth mask that you might for the pandemic. Okay, that was a lot. So now this is the green. What was it, like a jungle green? This one actually feels like it has more powder in the jar, but I forget what colors I had played with before. What's funny is that I started off being like, oh, I'm not going to show the yarn mop. I'm going to do that off camera, but reminding myself of the hues is helpful. And so right now, there doesn't appear to be a ton of color on these skeins. But from the amount of dye that I've added, there will be. If I was adding dye that had been mixed with citric acid, well, those colors are really close. I wonder if one of them is going to shift with heat. I'm not seeing a huge difference between the Coral Reef Aqua and the green, but we will see. We will see. I mean, I think the Coral Reef Aqua probably is more blue. But neither of them is very yellow. Okay, and so this is the purple, which I think is more of a pinkish purple, if I remember correctly, versus being like a Rebecca plum color. I do love like iris type purples, but this is really fun. So a reason why I added the skeins on the counter so somewhat messily is that I wanted things of the color to be able to fall through multiple layers. That was a goal here today. Oh, this is deep. This is actually a nice deep purple. It's not a bright purple, but it's got some good berry to it. All right, I'm not gonna wait. Sometimes I might wait, but we're gonna go for it and flip things over, making sure the cameras are still filming. Okay, and this is going to spread some of the color a bit because I'm like, now it's getting rubbed on the counter a bit. But I'm spreading things out. And the places where we're going to want to pay attention are especially on the edges of the skeins where they might overlap with one another. So I know that I'm going to be wanting to do more flips as time goes on, but this is the general process that we're doing today.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Now that I am satisfied with the way the color is on the yarn, and I still can't tell the difference between the green and the aqua, but it's time to steam set the yarn. So I'm going to take this and lift it up and place it inside a steamer basket, which isn't that steamy yet because I just turned it on. I'm not wrapping the yarn in plastic wrap of any kind because it's not necessary. We added the colors all over. It's okay if they sort of blend and shift. So I am carefully trying to not drag, carefully picking this up, and I'm going to place it in a steamer basket. And you can see we have some dye left on our counter, but we have our beautiful yarn mop here to help us with that. So I'm bringing this over, and I will be looking for white sections, and we're going to rub it on the counter as another way to leave less dye behind. I will have to come and clean with a like paper towels. I always clean off the work surface, so that is something that will need to happen. But I think because there's space, I am going to go ahead and plop. I'm debating this. If I want to wait and steam set it on its own, or if I want to put this in with the basket. You know, I'm going to add this to the steamer basket with the rest of the yarn. The worst that happens is some of the spread color interacts with the color that we've got in the pot. But I'll bring you over there in just a moment. A lot of times I will steam set for 20 to 30 minutes, but since I just started and the pot is a little crowded, so that means it could take a little longer for things to heat up, I am going to steam set this for 40 minutes. Just to give it time for the water beneath to really start boiling. There's probably an inch or two of water here in the dedicated dye pot, but anyway, when the timer goes off, I will pop back over. All right, our 40 minutes are up. I'm going to turn off the steam, and I'm going to bring over a bin so we can remove the yarn. I do see red specks in here from where the purple broke, and I still don't know for sure if I can tell the difference between the green and aqua. But maybe we will be able to tell in the more speckled yarn. And it doesn't look like, we'll see if one of these looks like really different from the others. It doesn't look like we had some bad transfer. Oh, this is really pretty. This is very like impressionistic, but I think having everything in one pot worked well. We've got some beautiful speckles in here. The colors definitely did deepen and intensify a bit, but the green versus aqua are still, I guess the aqua, there's some that are a little more teal and a little more that are a deep green. It's so subtle, so subtle. But anyway, I'm going to let this cool completely so we can wash it. Let's wash our pretty speckled yarn. This is really pretty. Deb, I really hope you're gonna like it. All right, so we've got 1, 2. Notice when I wash yarn, I try to keep these zip ties up because this will help me prevent it being tangled. So those are our speckleds, and then we've got our glorious mop, which is very, very similar in the hues that you see, and the mop does have some speckles on it, but because most of the yarn was the dye was wiped onto it, it has a softer appearance overall. But I'm not expecting any bleeding. I think that this dye does a pretty decent job of just binding. I mean, I think it's a decent dye. It's just expensive. It's just expensive. And I'm now going to use a little bit of some clear dish soap that wasn't in focus, but we're rolling with it. Fill up with some soap. And sometimes the addition of soap is where we might start to see some bleeding. Normally I use just plain cold tap water, but if it's really cold outside, then I'll add a little bit of warmth to make it cold, but not frigid. Probably because my kitchen sink is right next to the outside, and so the ground, and yeah. But I don't see any bleeding, so therefore I am going to rinse out the soap, put the yarn through my spin dryer, hang it up to dry, and we'll come back for some conclusions. Here is the finished dry speckled yarn, and it's gorgeous. We have a lot of sharp speckles with some hints of some halo and spread, but really things are staying put. I am not really seeing large, I guess there are some large splotches in areas. It's hard to know. I think maybe I was adding the dye fairly thin, so we got good speckles. Because I'm like, this feels a little bit more like I'd mixed it with citric acid, which makes me curious if the dyes are a little more dilute with filler, but I don't know. Either way, this is gorgeous. We got fantastic, fantastic speckles. So looking here, maybe this is that, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name, Caribbean blue, and then that is the green. They are so close to one another in hue that, you know, I think I said this during my original review. The kit could use a brighter blue. The blue in here is stunning, but I feel like that this hue right here is one that you could get by mixing the blue and the green. So I don't know. I don't know, but either way, the subtle differences for speckling purposes are fantastic, and I love how this yarn turned out. Finally, we have our yarn mop, which is beautiful and soft, but also there are some tiny micro speckles in here. There, you can see that. And that doesn't always happen when I do this kind of technique. I mean, I expect some larger ones like that, but it's almost as though, yeah, like here, there's some really micro ones, which is beautiful. If these were the same yarn base, I think it would be really fun to work them together in one project. The heavier speckles and then the softer, more watercolor feel from the yarn mop, but they are different yarn bases. Like one is fingering, one is DK, which you could mix. That could be fun too. Ooh. So I now have a rigid heddle loom, which I haven't set up for the first time. And I'm not going to do it with this yarn, but it would be really cool to warp with like this and then do a thicker weft. I have no idea how something like that would turn out, but that would be a really fun way to pair the yarn together. Anyway, I completely digress, and I will likely film, I need to watch some tutorials to figure out how to weave, but at some point there will be some kind of vlog about weaving, and I am so excited. Deb, thank you so much for being my lab partner for this episode of Dyepot Weekly. I really hope that you enjoyed the video and that you're gonna love your speckled yarn. Thank you, Deb. If you would like to learn more about how you as a viewer can become a lab partner for one of my videos, you can get some shout outs and yarn dyed in an episode of Dyepot Weekly. There are 2 ways that you can sign up. There is a last minute lab partner listing where you can pick a video I've already filmed, and then I will film some last minute shout outs for you to insert into the beginning and ends of the video. And by being the last minute lab partner, you get to sort of pick the technique and get some hints about the final color. Or you can go for the more classic lab partner option where you tell me some colors to avoid and I will design a video with your color preferences in mind. And you also get shout outs and yarn in either of the cases. If this is confusing and you want to learn more, go and check out the listings in my Etsy shop. They'll be down in the video description. And if you're still confused, you can message me on Etsy. But please only message me on Etsy if you want to talk about something that I've listed in the shop versus asking dyeing questions. I do read the comments here on YouTube, so if you have questions about dyeing yarn, feel free to leave them down below in the comments section. My opinion of Greener Shades acid dyes is that they're wonderful acid dyes. I have not found any complaints. Beyond, my main complaints with them are the price, some of the marketing, and then the color range that's fairly limited. But if you're willing to put all of that aside, they perform well as acid dyes. So while I don't recommend that you go out of your way and add them to your collection, because mainly the price, it's just really expensive. If something about them interests you, they perform really well, and I will be using them more because I have them and I don't want to waste or leave any dye behind. So I will continue using them and exploring them as the years go by. I have no idea how long it'll take for me to use them up. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe and turn on notifications. On that bell icon, I believe you can have occasional or always or all notifications, and so you can customize it that way. And then you could go into your YouTube settings and change the way you receive your notifications if you want to make sure you are notified when I release new videos. Thank you so much for watching.